draft your very own patterns. This is going to be good for people who want to like make clothes, armor, cosplay, that kind of stuff. So if you're not a huge cosplayer and you just want to learn how to make clothes, stay in. If you are a cosplayer, welcome. I'm gonna do some slides because it's important to get some background visuals and stuff of what we're about to do. But the stuff that I'm gonna show you, I'm not gonna show you via slides because that's stupid. Also, I have a dress form right here. I swear it's not just like a random chest is like looking at me. That's because we are going to be doing 3 demonstrations. I say we, royal we. We are going to be doing 3 demonstrations for you. 2 of them are going to be a draping technique, and 1 of them is going to be a drafting technique. Now, right now, those words might mean nothing to you, and that's awesome. We're going to hopefully break down what those mean so that when you get to doing it, you'll feel good. Something I'm also going to make sure that you hit is what kind of materials you'll want to use to do this process, because I'm interested in making sure that you save as much money as possible during this process. Let's get started. Host, can you give me screen share capability, please?
There you go. Sorry about that.
Danke. All right. No, it's my fault for not testing it ahead of time. I like 99% of the time I test ahead of time. It's that 1% that always gets you. So just a quick introduction of why you might want to listen to me. I've got now 17 years of experience with making costumes specifically. I have more years of experience sewing, but that experience was mostly in like plushie making, which I don't do anymore because I have learned a new hobby, a new zen, and that's cosplay. I am largely self-taught, so a lot of what I am going to show you has been based on my own experiences as well as what I've picked up from folks who have had classical training by going to various art schools or fashion schools. So much of what I'm showing you is a combination of life hack as well as taking in as much as I can from books and experiences with others. So as I mentioned at the top of our quick little introduction is that there are really 2 schools of thought when it comes to making clothes. The first is called drafting and the second is called draping. And the difference between the 2 is really in the execution of how you go about making a flat piece of fabric, a 2-dimensional piece of fabric, and transform it into a 3-dimensional piece of fabric, or piece of garment wear. So when you are drafting, you're using math and measurements to figure out how a flat piece of fabric will form around a 3D body. This is, in math, we refer to this as a ray. And you might remember, like, when you were in the 5th grade, you might have gotten one of those pictures that had some boxes all stuck together and you had to cut it out. And then when you folded it together, the boxes formed a cube. It's like that, but instead of forming a cube, you're forming your body or a part of your body. On the flip side of that, there's draping. Now, draping, much like it sounds and much like our image shows, is when you literally stick fabric onto a 3-dimensional form so that you can see how the fabric hangs. There's an advantage and disadvantage to both methods. A lot of people swear by draping, particularly when they want to make flowy garments, because that gives you the advantage of seeing how that specific fabric that you are working with will flow on the finished product. A lot of people swear by drafting because you will know mathematically that all your lines straight, all your measurements are the, and that's very helpful when you want things to, like, if you make a gown and you want that gown to hit the floor and that's it, you might want to use some drafting techniques. So the technique that you use is honestly going to be up to you with regards to what you feel comfortable with and what the project calls for. I'll use a combination of the two for projects, with one exception. When I'm making historical garments, I tend to err on the side of drafting. And that's because when it comes to historical garment making, a lot of the historical patterns were based on trying to economize fabric because fabric had to be hand woven. And so once you weaved a rectangle or square of fabric, you didn't want to waste any of that. And so a lot of the time, historical pattern makers would use very boxy or triangular measurements because it was something that you could easily make straight lines and not waste any fabric. So, like, there are very few curves when it comes to historical patterns, and this is true both for Eastern as well as Western cultures. Little history fun facts for you. Sorry to interject it, but I have to. So I'm going to do a demonstration of draping, and technically I'm going to do 2 demonstrations of draping. And I have an image here of like a thing that I might want to make. I mean, look how flippin' cute it is. It's a Bulbasaur. Like, come on. I wish I drew it. I didn't, but it's very cute. But more importantly, this design of like this cute little, almost like a jerkin, is adorable, but it's also fitted. And yeah, you can make it so that it's loose fitting, which tends to give you a more masculine look because it flattens everything if you just, kind of make it like a t-shirt. But you can make it fitted, and I'm here to show you how to make it fitted. So we're going to go to the dress form for 2 reasons. The first reason is if you have a dress form, I can show you a way to use it. And then the second reason is because my dress form is going to stand in as a human, because right now we're socially distancing, hence me giving a virtual panel as opposed to a like in-person panel. So normally you would see like my slide, you would see that on like, a screen, and then you'd see me. We're not, this is we're doing a demo virtually. So I can't have people over is the point that I'm trying to make. My dress form is going to be people. If you're interested, her name is Alice. They were all named Alice. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my camera so that you can see my demo. Thank you for hanging in there while I do so. Different camera. Now you can see Alice. And you can still see me as a tiny window too. So you get me in duplicate, whatever, it's fine. And if you notice off to the side, you'll also see I have some Nookling plushies. I figured if I draw attention, it's actually the Nooklings, there's a Raymond plush, and there's a Celeste plush all in that corner near the Nightmare Before Christmas blanket. I guess I needed to show you that I'm a dork who likes Animal Crossing. All right, so let's talk about the things that you're going to need. Right now, I'm going to assume that this is a dress form my own. So right now, I'm just going to call it a dress form. Some of the things you're going to need, you could use measuring tape if you need to measure something, but I'm going to be draping, so I might not have to. Scissors, always helpful. I use these handy dandy Fisker anti-arthritis scissors. I like them because when I go to cut, I only have to move my thumb. We'll be using that like secondary. Some form of writing device. I've used pen, but I like marker because it flows easier. And then the other thing that I'm definitely going to use is muslin. Now, if you haven't heard of muslin, it's very important that you learn of it. And the reason why I'm telling you of it is in the past, I used to use my fabric that I wanted to use, often referred to as your fashion fabric. When you use your fashion fabric without having a plan or a pattern, you a little bit shoot yourself in the foot, because if you make a mistake, you've now wasted the fabric. Muslin is natural fibers, so it's very much like a cheap cotton. It does not have a lot of stretch, which is intentional, and it tends to be sold very cheaply. If you go to like a mom and pop store, you might be able to get like a bulk rate. Like I buy my muslin for $50 for 50 yards. That's $1 a yard. But most like retail fabric stores like Joann's will sell it like $3 or $4 a yard. In a perfect world, you get your muslin between $2 and $4 a yard, which is a lot better than your fashion fabric, which might be as much as like, I don't know, the other day I was using fashion fabric that was $36 a yard. I was not really cool with cutting into $36 a yard fabric without having a pattern piece ahead of time. Or heaven help, if you're working in garment leather, that stuff gets really expensive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take some of my muslin. I need to find like the part of this side where I started cutting into it. And say I wanted to make the bodice like what I had shown you in that picture. Move. I have a lot of pins that I keep in my dress form, and there's a reason for it. The reason being that my job here will be to pin my muslin to my dress form. Now, I happen to know that my dress form's measurements match my measurements. I know that because I took a measuring tape. I measured myself. I measured myself and then measured my dress form and used the adjusting dials to adjust accordingly. I will talk about what to do if you can't find your own measurement in a dress form shortly. So my first job is I'm literally taking the fabric. You can see where I've like marked it up in the past, so I'm going to turn it so you don't see it. I'm going to take my fabric, I'm going to lay it flat onto my dress form. And my goal is to literally pin it so it lays flat. That is my life goal. So I like to pin it at the top. I like to pin it at the bottom. Come on, pin. These pins have seen better days, so they're not as sharp. Now, there are some places where I can't get it to lay flat, like it's gonna bubble. And that's okay, because I'm just gonna pin where that happens. Now, the reason why that happens is because your body is not flat. It curves. So if I adjust for, like if I pin so the fabric is still laying flush to the dress form. Oh my gosh, not sharp pin. Can you do your job, not sharp pin? I'll just use a different not sharp pin. I should have just put in the sharp pins, but I got lazy. And every now and then I'll find like, oh, maybe I should have pulled this over a little bit. That's fine. As long as your fabric is laying flat. Now, one hint that I have for you is to look at your own physical human clothes, because you'll find that a lot of fitted garments tend to have like a shoulder seam, or they'll have something I lovingly refer to as a boob seam. That's because those are areas that tend to be curvy. Like if you have a chest, you might have a lovely little like curve to it, or your shoulder might need to have an interrupt in fabric. So here's where the use of a marker is helpful, because what I will do is I will mark like my shoulders. I'm marking my shoulders up here. I might mark my neckline, and I'll mark the front, like a front seam. And there's a reason why I'm marking a front seam, even if I don't want to have a front seam. That reason is because symmetry means that like I don't have to care about doing the other side. Our bodies are naturally symmetrical, so I can just enjoy copying over to the other side by like this half of my body. And now I'm just gonna kind of mess around here with where I think I want a seam to be. So wherever gets it to lay, where it lays flat. And now I've got like, you know, a front pattern piece. And sometimes I'll even label it F for front. So now what I can do is I can take this down and cut it. I won't make you watch the cutting process because you're going to get to see a lot of that happening in a moment. But I'm just going to quickly cut off screen the piece that I just made. Anyone who came to my panel last week will be very familiar with how fast and recklessly I was cutting fabric. The answer, very fast and very recklessly. My class last week was the cosplay hoodie making panel, and that actually employed a lot of draping techniques rather than drafting, because we frankly didn't need to do hardcore math. All right, so I've cut my piece out. Peace out, man. And now when I lay it, it should lay flat like a second skin to my dress form. And I can just kind of loosely pin it where, so that it sits nicely. Look at that, a pattern piece. So what I'll usually do is I'll then turn my dress form and start the process all over. I'll lay my fabric and pin it so that it lays flat. But one thing I will be mindful of, sorry for the weird camera zoom, is that I can kind of see a tonal difference. I might have to like, I might darken it so you can see it a little bit more clearly. I want to darken this line. This is why I tend to use markers, especially like really juicy markers, so that when I lay fabric, I can see through it through the muslin. Let's see if you guys can see it on camera. Here you go. You can see through the muslin. It's a little challenging to see, but there is a tonal difference. Here's where the line is. It's very slight, but you can see it a lot better in person. But my goal is to lay my fabric again. Stay. When your tripod doesn't want to connect to your camera anymore. That's the mood. So my goal then would be to pin this. And once again with my marker, like once I've pinned it in place, I can outline where my seam from the previous seam ended, and then I can just kind of like build along from there. So that's kind of like my first demo. But what do you do when you don't have a dress form? And that's what I'm going to show you right now. I'm still going to use my dress form friend, because now I'm going to call her Alice. And this is a method that will require 2 people. So if you live with somebody, this will be easier. If you don't live with someone, I can tell you I've tried it before, It's hard, but not impossible. For this method, you're going to need plastic wrap, doesn't matter what brand, a pair of craft scissors, not fabric scissors. And I like to use duct tape. Some people will use like packing tape or masking tape. I like to use a pretty, I mean, this is literally called duct tape, like it's Duck brand duct tape. I like to use it because it's cheap, but has a lot of like structural support. So the idea is that you're going to take your plastic wrap and you are going to wrap it around the body of your body or your friend's body, whoever you're making a pattern for. This is not just to keep your friends fresh, although it does help keep them fresh. Now, on a real person, they have arms and stuff, and that's fine. You can just wrap around it. Just like when we did our draping on our, using our muslin, I'm just kind of like wrapping all around, but I'm only going to be making a pattern for 1/2 of the body, assuming this is symmetrical outfit. If it's asymmetrical, you are going to have to mark up the whole darn body. So I've got, you know, a layer of plastic wrap. I'm just going to pat it down so it's like a skin tight situation. So my next phase of life is that I'm going to take the duct tape and I will be wrapping the dress form in duct tape. I usually do this in like incremental steps because I find it to be just like easier. And in order to keep my sanity, I usually put a stabilizing piece of duct tape all the way around the dress form, even if I'm not planning on making the entire thing covered in duct tape. Now, for those of you who have made your own patterns for EVA foam, you might find this familiar, and that's because this is also a great method of making foam armor. I will caution though, please wear whatever undergarment you are planning to wear when you are making patterns like this. And I say that because this plastic wrap is going to sit on the body like a second skin. So if you want your costume to sit over, like if you're making armor and you want your armor to sit over fabric, well then wear the clothes that you're going to wear under the armor. Or if you are making a dress and you want to wear a certain undergarment, like a certain bra, wear that bra while you're doing this to ensure that this will be your very dimensions that you're planning on having. So I'm going to try to, as quickly as I can, I'm going to try to wrap, I'm just going to do 1/4 of this in duct tape. Now, what I always recommend to people is wrap or put more duct tape and more plastic wrap than the area of your body you intend to cover. So if this is only going to be like a boob armor situation, go lower than what you want it to be, because we are going to get to a phase I refer to as the drawing phase, and you want to be able to have a surface on which to draw. Now, when you're doing this with a partner, it is a little bit of a pain because you do, to some degree, have to relinquish a little bit of personal space. like I said, you can do this for yourself. And actually, if you use multiple layers of duct tape, you can actually use this to create a duct tape dress form, which you would stuff with newsprint, or you can use the duct tape to make a cotton pattern that you would then stuff with stuffing. But either way, you can make your own dress form that is to your body's dimensions at that time. And this is what I recommend for people who can't find a dress form in their size. And that's not just like, I can't find a dress form in my size because I am too small or too big. It can also be I can't find a dress form in my size because my chest is smaller than my butt, so I have a size small chest but a size large butt, or I have a shorter torso than the dress form itself, or I have a longer torso than the dress form itself. Either way, if a dress form doesn't work for you, you can always make a duct tape version. And that will work for you because it's literally you, but in duct tape. All right, so I have tape here of my dress form. And once again, I'm going to take my marker and I'm just going to mark up some dimensions for, like, I don't know, a cute top or something. So I want it to be a little bit lower cut, show off the goods. I want it to have a strap. This is where, like, if you drew your own design, like, it's going to be really easy to draw, because you can literally just map out, like, oh yeah, I want it to, like, come to a bit of a point, or like I want it to have, like, this cool, like, zigzaggy thing going on. I don't know. This is where you get to be the boss. And it doesn't much matter. So, like, I don't know, maybe you need a zigzag thing, or like, I just kind of trying to make it interesting. So here's where you get to just, like, redraw it however you want. And maybe the design has other elements of it, like, say you're building armor and you need to, like, work in other design elements. You can really easily. It's not even hard. So, like, cool, right? Easy. Now comes cutting it down. Now, I find that most people get very uncomfortable when you cut down from their neck down here, or up down here and up from the front. I find most people feel uncomfortable that way. If you're doing this on a partner, cut from the back. Usually people feel more comfortable with that. If you're doing this on yourself, you kind of have no choice. You are going to have to cut from the top down or from the bottom up. Sorry, just letting someone in. All right. So I am going to just cut, like I said, I only marked up that quarter. If I were doing this for realsies, I might mark up the whole half. But you just want to see if you can put in exactly one cut to cut you down. And the reason for that is that you want to minimize how many pieces this comes off as. Now, if you wait one moment, I am going to transport us to table cutting mode, and you're going to see why in a moment, but it does mean that I have to end the screen share temporarily while I reposition my camera angle. Now, I do this for you because I don't want anybody to get excessively dizzy as I move my camera around. I can see my camera right now on my screen, and I imagine, I don't know, if I get dizzy, that means other people would be getting dizzy. So this is for you. This is for you, other people. All right. Let's get that screen shared. Boom. All right. So that means over me, hello, you can see my camera. I have, let me get other tools out of the way. I have the piece that we just cut off, Alice. Don't need this, so I'm going to put it to the side. And now my life plan is going to be to just cut out the pattern that I drew. I'm not cutting anything else. I'm just cutting like the outside pieces that I drew, the outside edge. Now the advantage of using the plastic wrap is that the duct tape will stick only to the plastic wrap and it won't have stuck to you or anything else, like your clothes or your undergarments. And it means that when I go to remove it, I can now use this as a pattern piece because the back of the duct tape is no longer sticky, it's stuck. So I'm just quickly finishing cutting the initial pattern out. This is why we use the craft scissors though, instead of using our fabric scissors. Because if we used our fabric scissors on like plastic wrap and duct tape, it will dull our scissors. So that's why we are erring on the side of using craft scissors. It's good to have a distinction between the two. If you don't have a distinction between the two, consider getting a distinction between the two. All right. So right now I've got a pattern piece, but you're going to notice it has a boob. Our pattern has a boob. Now, if I go to outline this onto fabric, it's not going to work. There's this sticky uppy part. Now, different people do this part in different ways. One of the easiest things that you can do is you can find where that like boob mountain lives, and you can draw a line from like a point on the end to the topmost point of that boob mountain or whatever your curve is. So I'm just going to do that real quick. I'm going to draw a line to the top of boob mountain. Hopefully everyone can see the line from the edge to the top of boob mountain. And I am going to just put that single cut. Now that single cut is going to relieve a lot of the pressure that I had. So now when I lay it down, it lays flat. This is what is considered a dart. A dart is usually a triangular shape made in fabric so that when you sew that triangle closed, it creates a three-dimensional shape. It creates our boob mountain from before. Now, some people swear by darts because it is the most minimal requirement to get the shape that you're looking for as far as a three-dimensional shape. For me, I find that on cloth, this tends to make a very pointed boob, and I'm not into the Madonna from like the early 90s look. I don't know if you are. So what I often do is I extend that line up nice and artful like, because my goal is to create a seam.
And then I have a question for you, Mink, from Amanda.
Yeah.
If Alice was a real person, how do you handle removing the duct tape form with arms? Does it slide off easy like a normal top?
Yeah, it should. If you've wrapped them with the plastic wrap and included like some of their arm area, just so that the duct tape doesn't stick to their skin, it should remove pretty easily. At this point, I've done a variety of different duct taping of people's, and usually when it comes to removing from like the back of a person, we just kind of remove it like you're taking off a straight jacket. One thing I will say is that when it comes to drafting or draping patterns using duct tape on a person, I tend to do it piece by piece. So I'll do like torso separate from arm, just to make it so I'm not overwhelming how much I'm wrapping a human form in, because that is something to consider. There was a time when I had my boyfriend wrap the bottom half of me in duct tape, because I had made what's called digigrade legs. That's when you have foam on your knee area, like your upper thigh and your back calves, to make it look like you've got an animal back leg. It's very popular in like fur suits. And I wanted the fur to sit on my digigrade legs very snugly. So I had to use my under pads and stuff of my padded legs. I had to wrap all of that in duct tape and then mark out where like the fur markings were going to be. And that kind of made me feel like really intense claustrophobia. So you want to be mindful of that when you're doing this on a partner, just because you don't want to trigger them in any way. So that's why I find doing like torso, arms, waist down, those are like good ways to sort of mitigate that claustrophobic effect. You also want to make sure you're doing this in a well breezed, lower temperature room, just because this stuff doesn't breathe. They might get sweaty. So now I've got my pattern pieces ready to rock. I've got a front piece and I've got part of a side piece. It's always helpful to label them, and this is why I use like letters of the alphabet. And if I'm worried that like this S looks too much like this S, I'll even put like an arrow to show this is S for side, to show like this side, because you might forget. And as your patterns get increasingly wacky, you're going to want these orientation marks. I know for EVA foam, a lot of folks will do what's referred to as a registration mark, which is where they put like areas where this lines up with that. So when you pull it apart, you can see like, oh, these lined up. You can put registration marks on these too for even cloth, just whatever helps you, because this is all shorthand for you. So now that we've done two methods of draping, I'm going to show you the last thing, which is a drafting method. I'm going to show you just a basic shirt that I'm going to draft. I'm going to get a good amount of muslin here on the table. There we go. So to make a basic shirt, I am going to need my measuring tape, which got pulled over here. To make a basic shirt, I want to use some math. Now, if you have a t-shirt, you could literally just take your t-shirt, lay it on the muslin and trace, and that would work just fine. For me, I'm going to measure out my neck hole. So my neck hole is about 16 inches. It's about 16 inches. And for this pattern piece, I'm going to make 1/4 of a shirt. So 16 divided by 4 is 4. Here's where, if you have the edge of a fabric, it's very helpful, because I tend to use the edge of the fabric as like a straight line. So I'm going to make a 4-inch curve. Doesn't really matter how the curve, I do a very subtle curve, but I look for like my 4 inches and I'll do like a 4-inch curve. You can see my 4-inch curve. Next, I need to measure like my shoulders, which I usually do from behind. I measure top shoulder to top shoulder. And my measurement was about 14.5. So 14.5 divided by 2, because I'm only doing one shoulder right now. Well, 14.5 divided by 2 is 7.25. So I'm just going to round it to 7.5, because whatever. And to do the shoulder seam, here's what I do. This is my little life hack. I start at the bottom of my neck, not the top, and I find where 7.5 is, which is about here. which means that about here is where the shoulder seam is going to end. You can see it marked on my camera. So I need to connect the dots from here to here. So I'll just use my my tape as a straight edge. But boom, I've made a shoulder seam. Now the next part requires two measurements. I need to measure my chest measurement at the widest part of my chest, and I need to measure something called the arm eye. That's the part where your sleeve meets your torso. It's called the arm eye. So on me, my chest is very personal. I like to exhale deeply before I do this. My chest is about 36 inches, and my arm eye is about 17 inches. I'm going to round that to 18 just because I want to divide easier. So 36 measures my whole chest all the way around, but I only am going to be working on a quarter of it. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. So I'm going to measure out 9 inches and just kind of label that for myself. I'm going to measure that kind of wherever, it doesn't really matter, but like pretend that there's a line at 9 inches. This whole darn thing. Ooh, I'm going to make it darker so you guys can see it. There we go. That's like approximately 9 inches. Now, for my arm eye, I'm going to start at my end of my shoulder seam. And let's see, 18 divided by 2 is also 9. Hey, that was convenient. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make like a little, like so, with my measuring tape. Now, if you have, there are fashion rulers that have this kind of built in and baked into them. So you can buy those rulers and have this arc kind of like done for you. But it really doesn't matter if it's not super precise. It will be kind of like good enough for government work, as they say. All right, so I've made my 9-inch little arc, and we're doing pretty well. So now I want to see how low I want my shirt to be. I want my shirt to go, I want it to go to my belly button, so that's about 16 inches. I'll measure out, camera's in the way. I'll measure out my 16 inches and draw my lines accordingly. And now I have a basic shirt pattern. This is actually really good for the front of a shirt if you want it to, or for the back of a shirt, like at the nape of your neck. If you want it to be more like a t-shirt, I usually do like 3 or 4 inches down to make my collar. If you want to turn this into like a boat neck, you can make it a boat neck. You could make it like a crop top. Frankly, you could do a lot with the different like base, but when it comes to drafting, a lot of it comes down to starting with a base and then adjusting accordingly. Now, if you're working with a cotton or a linen, what you can do is you can use this pattern, and then instead of tracing your fabric, if your fabric were, say, I'm going to do some drawing for you guys. Say your fabric is a rectangle, and typically what people do, I'm going to zoom in for this. Not like that. Goodness. Sorry, that's what I was trying to avoid before when I was moving my camera and not making you see it. So right now you're just going to see some linen while I adjust my camera stand because I'm too far away from the computer now. Sorry for making y'all dizzy. Sorry, guys. Like I said, I tried to do this off camera so that I don't make any humans dizzy. There we go. Say our fabric is a rectangle and we put our pattern. Here's our pattern of our shirt. We put our pattern as close to the edge as possible so as not to be wasteful. Hey, that's great. But if you want to not sew and still have this hug your curves, say here's our rectangle, take your pattern and make it at a 90-degree angle to like your cotton or your linen. Say this is your shirt piece. Will you waste more fabric? Yes. But what you're doing is you're actually putting the fabric on, you're putting your pattern piece on the bias. And now I get to use my muslin to show why being on the bias is great. I will do that by taking some fabric and showing you the difference between on the bias and not. I will literally cut a rectangle of fabric for you. Here is a rectangle of fabric. Now, if I Amish zoom, you might be able to see that there is what's called a warp and a weft. And that has to do with how the fibers are woven. In cottons and linens in particular, you get some fibers that go across and some fibers that go up and down. That's your warp and your weft. When I pull up or down, they don't really do anything. But now if I, like, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't stretch. I'm just pulling it taut. But if I turn it 45 degrees and pull, you get a little bit of stretch. Now muslin, I told you, doesn't have a lot of stretch to it, but cotton and linen will have a lot more stretch. And I encourage you to try this at home with any cottons or linens that you have. If you turn it at that 45 degrees, you get just enough stretch that you might be able to get away with making close fitting, almost like t-shirt patterns without having to do anything with regard to like putting in boob seams or curved seams. And that can be very attractive for folks who don't want to have to deal with too much sewing, especially when it comes to curves. So now I am going to bring us back to our presentation so I can give you guys some extra notes and then take any questions. So one thing I do want to highlight is that when you are, if you're making your own pattern, you don't technically need to start from square one in the methods that I showed you. It's totally fine to purchase a pattern that already exists and to just modify it. You can use parts of patterns you already have or parts of patterns that you've purchased or want to purchase and then be like, okay, but I want it like this, but a little bit different. You can trace your pattern pieces on muslin and then make any modifications like to skirt length or shape, and that can be very helpful to you as well. So at this point, I'm going to take any questions that people have about pattern making, really. I mean, technically it could be about literally anything. I'm open to your questions. If you don't feel comfortable unmuting yourself to ask, you can always ask in the chat, and then I'll just pop over to the chat to see what your questions are. Or if I can't see it in the chat, then a moderator will read it. I don't know.
Maybe do you have any recommendations for how to create your own patterns for bottoms, like skirts or anything like that?
Very much so. And this is where I'm going to use the whiteboard. All right, so if you're making a skirt, one of the easiest skirts you can do is you can just do a gathered skirt. So with a gathered skirt, what you're looking at is, I'm sorry, I'm just doing this with my trackpad. You're looking at a rectangle of fabric. You want the length to be about as long as you want it to be, plus like a hem, because let's not go crazy here. You don't want a raw edge necessarily. And then the idea of what you do is you literally will just like stitch the top, sorry, again, trackpad. You'll just stitch across the top to gather it. And then you gather it to as long as your waist is. And then what you'll do is you'll sew up both ends with a little bit of space for, like, I don't know, a zipper or some buttons or something. And what that does is that creates a dress that kind of gives you this triangular shape, and it'll have like these lovely little gathers at the top. That's probably like the easiest skirt that you could have. Second easiest is a circle skirt, or a modification, a variation of the circle skirt. And this does require some math. So the idea is that you're going to create, again, sorry, I'm drawing this with a trackpad. Let me see if I can do it with my finger instead. Oh, I can, and that's way better. Sorry, I have a touch screen. So the idea is that you're going to be making a circle. Now, most fabrics, for if you're doing like a full length circle skirt, you're going to need to either do as a half or even as quarter pieces. But the idea is that you want to figure out how long you want your fabric to be first. So you're going to figure out what your diameter is, or the diameter of the circle is going to be. But this also has to account for the fact that you take up space. So you need to figure out what the circumference of the inner circle is. And then you're going to take that circumference and you're going to divide, because that's how it works. So measuring around your waist. So say you have, like, I don't know, a 28-inch waist. So if your waist is 28 inches, again, touchscreen, sorry for the messy handwriting, then what you'll need to do is you'll have to use that pi r squared to figure out what the radius of this inner circle is, which I happen to know is like approximately 6 inches. So it's approximately 6 inches. And that will tell you that, get my highlighter. That will tell you that this part right here is 6 inches plus the length of your skirt. This is all very helpful to know, because what you're going to want to do is ultimately you're going to want to make a circle. Now you can make a circle doing lots of different things to like mark it. Sometimes what I'll do is I will have like a pencil with a string on it, and or like a piece of chalk with a string on it, and I will park the string in the center of my circle, and then I'll mark with the chalk that circle, because I'm creating a large compass. So you can do that to make a circle skirt. It's a very basic circle skirt, but it comes out looking very, very nice. Another thing you can do, which is just kind of fun, is you can make a square skirt or a rectangle skirt, which starts with a square. And if you fold it into quarters and then put a cut so that it just very much resembles, I'm gonna erase these lines here. So it resembles that 1/4 of, you remember that that circle we did? Anyway, you cut that, sew all the pieces together. The skirt winds up looking, so, oops, let me get my, the skirt winds up looking like this, which is which like can be a really fun look. I especially love this when I'm like going to Renaissance fairs. I'll put like a square skirt on top of a circle skirt, and it looks really, really pretty. A final like really easy pattern piece that you can do is figure out your measurement across your waist. You can add like an inch or two just so that you can like put an elastic through. I like to add as much as 4 inches when I do this. Anyway, so let's say we're going with that 28-inch waist. Let's add 4 inches, which I am told is 32. We're going to take that and we're going to divide it by 8 because we're going to make 8 panels. So 32 divided by 8 equals 4, right? I told you, math. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these long trapezoids. They're going to be isosceles trapezoids. Yeah, step back. You didn't think I taught math, but I do. I know that this part of the trapezoid has to be 4 inches plus whatever seam allowance. I know this part has to be my height. And then this base can be as long as I want. If I want my skirt to be enormous, I can make it super long. Usually I make it like, I don't know, between 14 and 20 inches because that's bearable. But the idea is if you make 8 of those and sew them together, then you can make a very functional, like Renaissance-y skirt, and it looks really dope. It's not quite a circle skirt, but it's close without having to go through the circumference craziness. Hopefully that quick little diagramming was helpful to you and helped approach that question.
Oh no, it did. I didn't know about that trick. I was like, oh man, protractor, circumference.
I know. I hate to say it, but like when it comes to drafting, you basically need to have passed 6th grade math. I know that for some of my more elaborate costume projects, where I knew I was going to be doing like a lot of drafting. So like, perfect example, I made a circle skirt that had ruffles going from bottom all the way up to the top, which basically meant that I needed to sew ruffles in concentric circles going from bottom to top. So I measured out how many inches are going to be in between so I could calculate the circumference. And I knew that each ruffle was like a 1-to-3 ratio of like the fabric is shortened. Like, so for every 3 inches of fabric, it becomes 1 inch of fabric, just because that's how my gathering worked. And I did all that because I needed to calculate how much fabric I needed, and I was using expensive fabric. So I didn't want to underbuy and get less than what I needed, but I also didn't want to excessively overbuy. I wanted to get exactly as much as I needed and not a whole lot more, because it was really expensive fabric per yard. So in that way, drafting can be very helpful because you can then calculate the area, and then you can use the fabric, like how many inches on the bolt, to help you calculate for the missing length, because you have the known width. And I know that that sounds really geeky. And one time I filled up like 2 full pages of paper with my calculations. But let me tell you how flipping book smart I felt when I filled up 2 pages with math calculations for the fabric amounts that I needed, and just like came up with a number, and it worked perfectly. And there's nothing more satisfying than when you come up with that number and you're like, suck it, 6th grade math teacher who said I would never amount to anything. But also at the same degree, suck it to 6th grade me, who was like, when am I ever gonna use circumference? And I'm like, oh no, all the time. No, I use it constantly. My life is a sham. So now you too can math, because you'll have to.
I love it. Hey, it's just way better than those 6th grade math problems where it's like, Abby has 25 apples and then she gave 13 to Jeremy, who cut it into 5 pieces.
I'm gonna tell you something truthful. I teach children. That's not the truthful part. I teach children. Some of them know that I make costumes. For the kids who know that I make costumes and also learn math from me, I will sometimes give them math problems about what I need to calculate for fabric amounts. So a couple of years ago, I showed one of my students a design I was making. And I was like, okay, here's the scoop. it was a multi-step multiplication addition problem. So rather than working on, so-and-so has 2 apples and so on and so forth, I was like, hey, here's a design for a Vaporeon costume I'm working on. He's like, neat, Pokemon costume. I was like, yeah, I know, I'm really excited for it. Here's the situation. I told him I needed to have alternating diamond patterns. And together, my ultimate goal with him was I needed to calculate how many blue diamonds and how many yellow or like peach diamonds I needed to have in order to do the quilting that I needed for the sleeves of my cosplay. And that was the parameters. I showed him the picture. I gave him any measurements that he needed, but I was like, I don't know how many blue and how many peach I need to have. And I really would like to know that number ahead of time because I don't want to like be halfway finished with the sleeve and realize I ran out of blue diamonds. I need to know. And so I made him figure it out, and it was actually pretty rad. And he was like, oh, well, you need to have like 148 blues. And then it was great. So, I can
absolute genius. Combining both worlds, cosplay and teaching.
He was helping me though, and I used to be
I know.
When we were done, I was like, excellent, I hope you're right. And they would do that on a Friday, so I came in on Monday, I was like, good news, buddy, you were right. And then I showed him a picture of what I was working on. He was like, yeah.
That's absolutely amazing.
That is a 1000% true story, right down to the fact that I almost said his name and I was like, haha, confidentiality. Nope.
Oh man.
Good day to be alive. You should see my math class when I teach tessellations and do it via drawing Magikarps. Yes, I've made a Magikarp tessellation, and if you need help remembering what tessellations are, I suggest you Google and see some really rad tessellations.
Is that the one where you make stuff out of geometric shapes? It's been a while.
That's the one where you make repeating forms out of geometric shapes. And
yes.
If you take tessellation to its greatest degree, this is also how fabric patterns for like those cool repeating patterns that you see on quilts, how like you can have the fabric be as big or as small as you want, but the pattern will still repeat after a certain size. You can use tessellations to help you determine that. Just a fun aside if you're ever designing your own fabric.
Oh man, that's such a throwback. I used to love doing that so much.
I'm sorry, I didn't intend for this last part of the panel to be hello math time, but here we are, hello math time. So if no one has any other questions, comment, why are we teaching with apples and not fabric? Because you're not in my math class. I use a flipping parachute to teach time. And I'm talking the parachutes that you use in gym class. Like, my math class is dope.
I wish I had you as a math teacher. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you learn like everything. It'd be so good. Anyway, I do want to thank you guys for seeing my panel, for coming and checking it out. You can follow me on all of the above presented social media. If you have other questions about patterns or about cosplay or literally anything, because we're all starved for human contact, feel free to email me or to message me on any of these platforms, and reach out. Don't be a stranger. I am a person for you.
Does anyone have any last questions?
I'll just do this like dorky face stuff.
All I'm saying is I wish you were my math teacher.
Etsy shop. My shirt is from hellbunny.com and my necklace is from ModCloth. To answer those questions, none of those places endorsed me.
Oh man.
I wish they would though. Especially Hell Bunny. They have very cute fashion.
I was was noticing your shirt though during your panel, and I was like, that is so
it's
cute.
A full-on dress.
Oh, it's a dress. That's so cute.
Oh, I almost wore my pinafore that literally is the Ouija board pinafore. Let's have a moment for it because it is dope.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hell Bunny.
You know, one day they will. Maybe they'll see the stream and be like, hey.
That would be fantabulous. I'll just like truncate this part of the video and just send it like, oh yeah, go ahead.
Did some free advertising for you all.
I like the careful washing the dress so you don't summon demons. Oh, but what if I am the demon? I might already have summoned me. I like this developing lore. All right, guys, I want to thank you so much for coming to the panel. As I may have said at the beginning of the panel and only to the moderators, this panel, while scheduled to be a 90-minute panel, really only needed to be an hour-long panel with a little bit of extra time in case there were questions. As I said before, if you realize, oh my gosh, I did have a question and I forgot to ask Mink when she was just hanging out. Oh, what will I do? Feel free to just email me or message me on my social media. That's a great way of getting a hold of me, and I will answer questions for you. I'm not one of those like weirdos who's like, I'm not spoiling any of my proprietary information. I'm like, oh, please take all my proprietary information. Learn from my fails. Maybe someone will get it right, because it wasn't me the first time I did it. So I encourage you to reach out. On that note, I do believe at 2 p.m. there will be another panel right here. So do enjoy your intermission until then. Enjoy your mini webcon sessions, everybody.
Thank you, Mink.
Thank you.